Hello, fellow Star Wars timeline travelers, and welcome to the final episode in our pre-Acolyte Blitz, where we'll introduce you to the characters from this Acolyte series starting next week on the 4th or 5th of June, depending on your time zone. And we'll also recap key characters and concepts we've discussed that might be relevant to the show, as well as talk through a few more that might turn up as well. So who are we? Hi, I'm your host, Elysia, and of course, I couldn't do these lore-centric episodes without Deadeye Jedi Bob. Hi, Bob. Thank you for serving with me in this whirlwind blitz through the early history of Star Wars this month. We made it.
Yes, we did. And as for being here, it's always a pleasure.
So we've discussed 3 ages so far, Dawn of the Jedi, the Old Republic, and the High Republic. Is the Old Republic still your favorite so far?
I believe it is.
Okay, that's fair. And why is that?
I think because of all of the Jedi versus Sith goings on in that, just always fun to come back to, I think.
All right, yeah. And if you could tell listeners to read or watch or listen to any one book or show we've talked about so far, what would you choose?
As of this recording, it's Light of the Jedi, which kind of gets the whole High Republic ball rolling. But future me is probably going to be hollering about the Acolyte as soon as that starts to air, because I think that's going to be something special.
Yeah, I think so too. All right, well, let's get into it then. So we are, for listeners at home, we are recording this episode on May 30th, 2024, and the content of this podcast was accurate and up to date when recorded, but that might change as more content is released. For instance, we are definitely going to be wrong about some predictions for the Acolyte. But of course, we will issue updates from time to time to cover anything that's been added to or changed to the timeline, also in the materials we've covered before. And we'll be spoiling anything that happens up to this point in Star Wars in universe history, but names people might know aside, we'll do our best not to spoil anything that happens after the Acolyte until we get to that point in the timeline. And we have not seen any of the episodes ourselves, and we've avoided all spoilers. But there are 3 pieces of heavy speculation that may turn out to be more than that we'll discuss at the very end of this episode. So we'll save those for the end and warn you before we get into that. But for the most part, we know nothing, Jon Snow.
Right.
We're just going to be looking at what we know about the main character so far, the setting and the premise, and plus who or what we think could show up based on everything we've been talking about. So this episode does build heavily on especially our discussions of the High Republic. So I would recommend checking out the High Republic overview episode if you haven't yet. But, do whatever works for you. And also, if this is your first episode and you want to hear more, I recommend starting with the quickie intro app that's labeled Start Here to learn how this podcast works and key world building terms we keep using over and over. You'll find also a link in the show notes to a blog post that gives you more insight into what we've covered so far and what's coming soon. So the Acolyte. So Bob, why do you think the Acolyte is a big deal for Star Wars fans?
Well, I think it's going to bridge that gap between events in the High Republic and events leading directly up to the prequel trilogy. I think we're probably going to see quite a bit of what the Sith are up to in the shadows. I mean, it's just speculation on my part, but I mean, hey, since it's called the Acolyte, I mean, it could very well happen, I think. And from what we know, we will probably be seeing events from the perspectives of certain individuals that prefer the dark side of the Force.
Yeah, it's a new era for live action, and everyone keeps saying it's the first outside the Skywalker saga, but what if they pulled the Skywalker story back and we found a pre-Skywalker? Just
that
kidding.
Very well could happen. Yeah.
Could be. But yeah, so this first season, there's 8 episodes that are dropping weekly with 2 to start on June 4th/5th on Disney Plus, of course. And the creator is Leslie Headland. And she co-created Russian Doll, the Natasha Lyonne show on Netflix. Did you watch that, Bob?
I'm going to now. I
Yeah,
recently heard
okay.
about it and I saw her attached to it, and I was thinking, I need to go back and watch that.
I'll be honest, I watched for Natasha Lyonne, but it's a really good show. And there's a few people from that cast who come back here, but it's got like this dark, trippy vibe that I'm kind of getting from the trailers of this show as well. One thing you may hear people whining about is that the creator started her career at Miramax. I just want to remind people who might be too young to know this, but that was a top studio and a great place to work. And yes, she had the misfortune of being Harvey Weinstein's personal assistant for a year. I gather that that wasn't a pleasant experience. She says that she was never sexually assaulted, but she was definitely, it was clear she and his other assistants were abused in other ways. She wrote about the experience in a quote unquote fictional 2008 play called Assistance about a character called Daniel Weisinger. You can find the summary of the play on Wikipedia if you're curious. It was going to be turned into a TV show starring Kristen Ritter, but nothing's been said about it since 2013. So I guess that never happened. But yeah, what do you know about Leslie Headland?
I've actually heard about her connected to the Acolyte, but before that,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just kept missing her name popping up and things. But since she's doing Star Wars, I'm definitely going to go back and give Russian Doll a chance, and I really want to read the synopsis of that play on Wikipedia. I was about to say Wikipedia because hey, I mean we're talking about Star Wars, so
It's the crossover wiki.
yeah.
um, yeah, but she's been a lifelong Star Wars fan. She basically reached out to Lucasfilm after the success of Russian Doll, and she was like, "Hey, hear me out. I have an idea." And this show is the result of that. So she said in March, she said that she pitched multiple seasons of the series to Lucasfilm, and she has a plan for a second season if it's ordered. But she wants to take a break after the first season due to the long production timeline. And she also said she's going to be paying attention to fan feedback. I hope not too closely, honestly, because sometimes I think like stuff like that's what went wrong with the issues with the sequel trilogy.
I think so too. What really jumped out at me was just how much she loves the franchise and has been a lifelong fan. And when I hear people that work on, TV shows or animated series, things like that, mention, how much they love the franchise that they're working on, that really, I think, makes me confident that probably going to be seeing something special.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it's really going to knock my socks off. So I can't wait.
Yeah, she promised there wouldn't be a cliffhanger at the end of the season, or a massive cliffhanger at least. She said there would be catharsis. Um, but I love that she's a fan of the franchise. She's a fan of Legends, and she did say that she was able to bring a few major things from Legends into canon. So that's exciting. So do go listen to our Dawn of the Jedi, Old Republic, and Knights of the Old Republic episodes if you haven't yet, because those might end up being pertinent. Um, but it sounds like her writer's room, she made it a mix of, she has famously one writer who's never watched a Star Wars before this, but she did that on purpose to bring a fresh perspective. And then the rest of her writer's room, some of the people are just fans of the original trilogy, like they don't really like anything after that. Others are Dave Filoni devotees, Dave Filoni being the one who's done basically a bunch of stuff we're going to be talking about for the next in eras 4 and 6 especially, I think. But he's kind of inheriting George Lucas's throne for the Star Wars kingdom. So she's got a mix of different types of Star Wars fans working on this, which I find promising. What do you think?
I think exactly the same thing. I think you want people working with you that love the franchise. It doesn't matter what part of it. I think if you have folks that really enjoy it and have enjoyed it for years, and that actually want to come in and write for it, and they're not just in it for the cash. I think if they actually love what they're working on, that kind of tells me that it's going to be something very special. If you actually like what you're doing And if you get paid to do that at the same time, I mean, that sounds like you're living the dream right there. So
Yeah, and it sounds intriguing. So she pitched it to Lucasfilm apparently as Frozen meets Kill Bill, which I'm the Kill Bill part I get, but I'm like, Frozen? Why Frozen?
yeah. Wow, this is the first time I've heard of the Frozen bit. Okay.
Please tell me there's a musical number. Just kidding. I don't think there is, but I wouldn't mind it if there were.
Yeah, now I'm kind of wondering about that. Who knows?
But yeah, she says she wanted to explore the Star Wars franchise from the perspective of the villains. And she felt the High Republic era would be the best point in the timeline to do this because of the Sith, who are the villains in the films. They are very much outnumbered and in hiding during this time. So, very much on the back foot. And she says a key theme in the franchise is underdog versus institutional threats. And in this point of the timeline, the Jedi are the institution. They are not the underdogs. So who do you think might be the underdogs?
I imagine the Sith probably see themselves as
Yeah.
underdogs.
I wonder if it's going to make us empathize with the Sith.
I imagine some will. I'm certainly going to be holding them at arm's length myself. It's like, nah.
Well, but okay, so I like that a certain reviewer that I saw said that about her in general, much of her work focuses on cultural vandalism and addiction. She said that I'm attracted to stories about people who have created prisons for themselves and are trying to get out of them.
Ooh.
So I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by what
Yeah,
that means. And
yeah.
do you know what Rashomon style storytelling is?
First time I've
It's
heard of it.
So Rashomon is a old Kurosawa Japanese film from the 50s about an event that takes place, and then you see this event from several different perspectives. And in each time you see a different perspective, you learn something new about it. You see that different people see the same event differently, you know.
Ah,
So apparently, this is going to be that kind of storytelling, exploring shades of gray. And she says the story is like an onion, with each episode peeling away something to reveal a new layer.
very cool. I'm reminded of a Batman the Animated Series episode called POV, I believe, and that had that type of storytelling. You saw the event
Okay.
from different perspectives of cops from that particular animated series. So I've definitely seen it before,
Yeah.
unbeknownst to me.
Yeah, no, exactly. Sounds like exactly it. Yeah, I love that's my favorite kind of story actually.
Mhm.
Because it gives us empathy for how people experience things differently, and that we are so sure like, well, we saw this happen, but when you see it through somebody else's eyes, it might look completely different.
Right.
Well, so the story itself is set in 132 BBY, so before the Battle of Yavin, before the date of the original movie. So this is 100 years before the prequel trilogy, and this is nearing the end of the High Republic era. Um, so yeah, Headland, she noted that the original trilogy has a like somewhat lived in quality, and says the prequel trilogy is sleeker and more advanced because, well, in the real world, those films came out later and there was more advanced VFX. But she says she's with the Acolytes aesthetic, she's following that trend backwards. So saying like the further you go back into this, you know, golden age era, the more exciting and sleek and interesting things are going to look. Um, and people will also notice that the robes, they have two types of robes. When they're in the temples, they're wearing white and gold robes a lot. And then when they go out, they have more like the brown robes over top, which we come to know later in the timeline with also some gold there. So it's
Mhm.
this transitional time in fashion. But yeah, what do you think are some of the most important concepts that we've talked about in the High Republic that might pop up or play a role in the storytelling?
Concepts. I'm wondering if we're going to be delving a bit deeper into how certain individuals perceive and use the Force. I know we'll
Hmm.
certainly be focusing on Jedi, certainly the dark side and the darker aspects of the Force. I wonder if we see possibly, very possibly, the folks from Jeddah pop up. Who the heck knows at this point? I can't believe we're less than a week away from this show
Yeah.
as we
We know
record
that
this.
we know there's witches.
Yes.
So that's interesting. Um, but yeah, so I mean, basically everything that we set up in the High Republic overview could play a role here. But this is 100 years after Young Jedi Adventures, the subject of our last episode. So the Nile, the big threat for most of the age, they're thought to have been defeated. We don't know for sure, but this is the thinking. Um, we know the Jedi and the Republic are working increasingly closer. We know that Force-sensitive children are being pushed into becoming Jedi or being pushed into advancing at younger ages. And maybe the golden era of the High Republic is starting to look a little tarnished.
Yeah.
But overall, it's still a time of relative peace. There's maybe that leads to less vigilance because of the peace, but it's also interesting that this is maybe the first Star War not set during a war.
True. I think a lot of the events that I've read about in the High Republic book series, you have quite a few disasters that Jedi are attempting to avert. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's basically Jedi versus pirates and terrorists and all. So I wonder if
Right.
we'll be seeing more of that kind of, peacekeeping going on for starters in the Acolyte. I would very much like to see maybe a few Nihil holdouts possibly,
Mm-hmm.
but who the heck knows at this point?
It seems they should it probably should at least mention it, but it's
Right.
interesting to see in the trailers, we see the diversity of the eras on full display. There's so many different types of aliens. Um, the fight choreo looks incredible, what we've seen so far. So just because it's not a war doesn't mean it's not going to be action and excitement, of course. But at its heart, it's a mystery thriller about there's a Jedi who is killed, and the question is who done it
Who
and
done
how.
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen the trailer once or twice with audio description, but when you're having to go in, I think, and come up with a script for a trailer, I'm sure they probably don't have a whole heck of a lot of time to write everything down. You have to think about writing
Right.
around all of the dialogue rather, because we do have some of that. So it's interesting to go in and watch it and then hear about what other fans see, because I wouldn't have known about the choreography, the fight choreography, if I hadn't gotten on Twitter and YouTube and seen what other people were saying about the trailer. I really like that
Right.
everyone's stoked about how the fights look and about the diverse alien species that we're going to get in this show.
Yeah. Where the audio description trailer, I couldn't find one on Twitter. Is that only on Disney Plus?
Yeah, it's only on Disney Plus, I think. I haven't seen
Yeah.
it on YouTube at all. The only
That's what
audio
I mean on
description
YouTube.
trailer, yeah, the only audio description trailer on YouTube is Eclipse, I do believe. And
Wow.
that's just a
Why is
video game,
Quantic
yeah.
Dreams leading the way in that? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does look great overall. It was filmed mostly on practical sets and on location in the Beacons National Park in Wales and especially all around the island of Madeira in Portugal. So it does, yeah, I think it's going to have high production values. That's what we're seeing in the trailer, at least. It's introducing new characters and definitely bringing new lore. And we're going to get into those new characters and maybe some old ones that might pop up right after a quick break. All right, you ready to get into the characters of the Acolyte as we know them so far?
Yeah.
So the main character seems to be a character named May, played by Amanda Lestenberg. So you might know her as Rue, the child from Hunger Games. I also saw her in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. You saw that one, right, Bob?
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay. I always assume you've seen every horror movie. She also played Spider Bite in Across the Spider-Verse. And yeah, she's done a bunch of other stuff. She plays the violin in real life, by the way, just an aside. They put out a nice video of her playing the Force theme, which we talked about in the Young Jedi Adventure Season 1 episode, but is also the theme song for this podcast. Did you hear that?
I plan on listening to it right before the
Okay.
show starts.
She's very talented. She's very good at that.
Yeah.
But she seems to be the breakout star of the show. She's given a lot to carry apparently, and reviews seem to be positive. I haven't really read them. I just know that they are generally quite positive because I'm trying to avoid spoilers.
Oh, you and me
um,
both.
She's a former Padawan, and so again, the Padawan is when you are a force sensitive child, you first become a youngling, like we see in the Young Jedi Adventures. Although they're younglings that apparently already got their kyber crystals, because we already talked about the fact they seem to have operating lightsabers for some reason.
Yeah.
Um, but then you become a Padawan next, and as a Padawan, you are the apprentice of a specific Jedi who becomes your master. So she was a former Padawan. Something happened. She's no longer a Padawan, and she's doesn't seem to, at least what we've seen in the trailer, she doesn't seem to be wielding a lightsaber. She seems to be wielding some dual daggers. Are you excited for her? Or what character are you most excited to see, Bob, so far?
Yeah, I am pretty excited for her. As far as I know, she's actually one of the only characters from the show that's getting an action figure. Like right when they started
Mm,
making the big Acolyte announcements, Hasbro did a little stream with her and I think another Jedi or a Jedi named Soul, and they're
mm-hmm.
going to get action figures. So I saw that her box contents only included daggers, and I thought, huh, well this should be interesting. So needless
Interesting.
to say, I snagged up those or pre-ordered them as soon as I could.
Okay, I want to hear. Yeah, we have to hear once they come in what you think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Soul, he seems to be the other main character. He's played by Lee Jung-jae, and he's a respected Korean actor, but if outside of Korea, he's best known for the show Squid Games. And apparently, Headland was around the time she was working on the show. She was watching Squid Games and she saw him and she was like, he's so good. I need him for my show. And so he learned English for this role.
That is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, especially he's been doing quite well in interviews. Um, but he's the former master of this wayward May character, and he's a still respected Jedi master in the Order. Um, he's described as still and stalwart with a deep sense of compassion. He wields a blue saber, and he has a new young Padawan named Jackie Lon. Do you know Daphne Keene?
I recently heard of her. Isn't she in Dark Materials, which I've also yet to
Yes.
see?
Yeah, no, his Dark Materials is one of my favorite book series. So yeah, she plays Lyra, the main character in that. And she's also, a lot of people will know her as X-23 from Logan. So she's the other like kid girl Wolverine character.
Okay, that's why that name sounded so familiar to me. Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny how many of these actors I first hear about in terms of Star Wars, and then I go back, and that tends to get me
Hmm.
interested in everything they've done before. So I feel like Star Wars is my gateway to a lot of other interesting movies and things I otherwise wouldn't have wanted to watch until I've heard about so many of these wonderful performers and what all they've been in beforehand. So
Hey, not a bad way to go.
yeah,
She's almost unrecognizable visually though, because she's playing a Thelan human hybrid. So yeah, we don't really see many hybrids in the Star Wars universe, do we?
right. I don't think we do.
We've gotten at least one more Thelan hybrid, and we've also gotten like Twi'lek human hybrids, but occasionally, very occasionally. But Yeah, this one is because she apparently is based on a favorite. We talked about the Glup Shido characters in the Young Jedi Adventure episodes. So there's a Glup Shido character called Ristal Sant. She was a human Thelan hybrid singer and dancer in the Max Rebo band, which appears in the original trilogy. And she's one of Leslie Headland's favorite Glup Shido characters. So she's like, we got to have one of those in my show.
She's actually one of mine too. Back in the late 90s, they made her in a handy dandy Jabba's Dancers 3-pack way back in
Ah.
the Power of the Force action figure days. So I actually had that one.
Oh, so do you know what the Thelan look like?
Yeah, I remember the interesting feet going on, and I think they had horns there on the
Yeah.
sides of the head. So I love the look of that character.
Yeah, so their most characteristic thing is that they have like these three little mini horns that are sticking out of the temples on either side of their face. And they tend to be quite colorful, I guess, because Jackie is a human hybrid. She's less colorful. She's got pale skin and matching hair, and she's got some dark orange spotted skin, because that's a thing that Thielen have, the spotting. And it's just like around streaks on around her horns and the side of her face. So yeah, we'll see more of them throughout the timeline. But Jackie is described as composed and mature for her age, very studious. She might get along with another character who doesn't like to be called Vern, that we're going to talk about in a moment. And she has a green lightsaber. And yeah, this brings us to a character that a lot of people are especially excited about because of the actress playing it. Can you guess who this is?
I'm wondering if this is going to be the character Vanessa Rowe.
No,
No.
not yet. No.
Okay.
Carrie Ann Moss's character, Indara.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. No, we'll get to Vanessa Rowe in a moment. But a lot of people are excited about Carrie Ann Moss to play this Jedi character, Indara. And Carrie Ann Moss is best known as Trinity from The Matrix.
Mhm.
So basically, Leslie Headland, she wanted someone where audiences would be like, oh yeah, that's a badass Jedi. And said she literally wanted Trinity with a lightsaber. So she got her. And she has a green lightsaber. And then, did you ever watch The Good Place, Bob?
No.
Okay. I recommend it. It's a fun, silly, philosophical show. And on there's a lovely himbo named Jason, played by an actor named Manny Jacinto. And Manny Jacinto is playing a character in this series called Kimir, I think it's pronounced. So he's a former smuggler who now, quote unquote, lives a life of leisure as a trader of unique objects. So,
Uh-oh.
that's promising.
Yeah.
No, I have to point out, I listen to the Ringerverse podcasts, and Mal and Joe on there on the House of R are constantly referring to the fact that in the trailer he's like, I'm just a guy. They're like, oh, just a guy, right? Just a guy. A lot of people are finding him suspicious. He does say an interesting quote in the trailer. He says, "The Jedi justify their galactic dominance in the name of peace, but that peace is a lie." So what
Uh-huh.
do you think attitudes are changing, or have they always been this way? And is he alone, or do more people feel this way?
That quote has very disturbing um
Mm-hmm.
yeah, connotations to it if you
We're
think
gonna
about a
get it.
certain yeah.
We're
Okay.
gonna get into that in one of the quasi, not spoilers, but
Yeah. Okay.
spoiler adjacent speculation at the end of the episode. Yeah.
It's fascinating that you're bringing up who quotes what in the trailers because there's just so little time for the AD tracks to point
Mm.
all that out. So I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
sure who'd said that. So cool to find out that that was him, though. That
Yeah.
makes me see him in a different light now.
Kimir. Yeah. I don't know what kind of, maybe he might have some dark objects in
Hmm.
his collection. But that does bring us to a character we keep teasing and have been teasing for weeks. Did you know that there's a character called Vanessa Rowe?
Why, yes, I did.
Um, so she is a character from the High Republic's books, played in the show by Rebecca Henderson, who happens to be Headland's wife, but is also a bona fide actress, recognizable actress in her own right, who's also in Russian Doll and a whole bunch of other stuff. But yeah, Vanessa Rowe, don't call her Vern unless she lets you. What are your favorite things about this character?
I think the thing that stood out about Vernestra to me when we first met her in the books is that she's very humble. I think she will be the first one to admit to you that no matter how old you are, how young you are, you always have a lot to learn, and that's what really stood out to me. I like that she is very sure of herself, but at the same time, she's always open to learning new things about the Force, about herself. And I like that she, on more than one occasion in the books, has admitted that no, she doesn't have all the answers.
Mm.
So she seems like a very flexible character, I think.
Yeah, so her youngest introduction is at the age of 16 as a young kind of Jedi prodigy. She's one of the youngest Jedi Knights in history, like becoming a full-fledged Jedi when most people are just settling into becoming Padawans. And so, yeah, that she's first in a test of courage, is I heard her youngest, but then she is spread out throughout the phases 1 and 3, which are again adjacent on the timeline. She is a main character appearing through books of different ages, so she's definitely one of the biggies from this part of the timeline, and she is a Mirialan, is her species. So people who are familiar with the Clone Wars and the recent Tales of the Empire might know a character called Barriss Offee. So Barriss Offee is also a Mirialan. And the Mirialan, so in this case, yeah, they're both green, both the ones I mentioned. Sometimes they're yellow or pink or purple, and they have these black diamond. I'm not 100% sure if their tattoos are natural. I think they're meant to be tattoos that record significant moments in their life. And Vernestra, when she appeared younger, she had dark purple hair, but now her head is bald and she has these diamond patterns like on her scalp, basically.
Oh, cool.
So as a species, yeah, they have a strong connection with the natural world, and they are firm believers in the ways of the Force. So this is one of the reasons why we tend to meet a few of these as we go through the timeline. But by the way, if I mention a name as a reference that I say is from a later era, like Barriss Offee, and you don't know who that is, please don't worry about it. Just shove that name out of your head for now, and we'll talk about that character later. That reference is just trying to be helpful for those who do know that character already, to give them idea of, you know, what kind of character we're talking about. But in this case, we are definitely talking about the Miri Island named Vernestra Rowe, and someone you'll be seeing on your screens in just a few more days. But yeah, she's been through the ringer in the books, right?
Oh yeah.
She remembers the Nile, the kind of super pirates. She remembers the plant monsters, the Drengir, the Nameless, the ones who suck the Force out of the Jedi, out of Force users. She remembers especially the fall of Starlight Beacon, all that other stuff we talked about in the High Republic overview.
Yeah, she's had to deal with quite a lot of loss. I think it's amazing how much she's been through, and yet she's still standing. I think that's one of the things I
Hmm.
like about her quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, she had a master named Stellan Gios, and she took it hard when he was killed, when he sacrificed himself during the fall of Starlight Beacon to save a city. And yeah, by the way, we talked about Starlight Beacon and the High Republic breakdown, and we'll talk about these specific events in the High Republic Phase 1 breakdown of the books. But in Phase 1, she also became close to a young human inventor named Avon Staros, who she thought also died in the fall of Starlight Beacon, although it turns out that Avon did not. But Avon's story isn't finished. Um, I do have to mention one interesting thing about Avon Staros that could turn up. So she's a young scientist who fell under the wing of Vernestra, but she was researching crystals. We don't know exactly what she found, but we know that the information she had is on a data cube. So, data cube, I guess, is like a holocron for normal people.
Mhm.
It's just basically like a hard drive. But we know that there are times in the timeline where people are afraid of this information getting into the wrong hands. So, whatever she was researching about crystals, there's something dangerous in there. So, it would be interesting if that research turned up in the show.
Yeah, I think so too.
She thought that she was lost also in the fall of Starlight Beacon, and also thought that her Padawan, Imri Kantaros, was dead in the same catastrophe. And at that point, she was losing faith in the Jedi, and she became something we talked about in a previous episode, a way seeker. Um, so the way seekers, again, they are people who they get permission from the Jedi Council, but then they say, we're going to follow our own way for a little while. We're going to distance ourselves from the council, and we got to figure some things out. So she did that, and it ended up leading her back to Kantaris, who she found alive. Um, and we're not really sure how any of their stories end in phase 3, but yeah, this is all behind her, and probably I can't imagine what she's been through since.
Yeah.
Tell us about her weapon, Bob.
Well, she has an interesting light whip, and one of the things I always forget about it was how the idea for this weapon came to her in a dream. I don't really know much about said dream. It kind of escapes me at the moment, but that has popped up online more than once. I don't know if it's in an actual book that I read, or it might have been in a comic. You'd think if it wasn't a book, I would remember it. But I find it interesting that she was kind of inspired to um, modify her saber in a dream. I don't know if it was,
Yeah,
something that the Force was telling her
like
or
a
what.
hyper. Hmm. It
Yeah,
seemed to be
and
visions she was getting in hyperspace. Yeah.
right, yeah, hyperspace visions, which I'm wondering if we might see a bit more of in the TV show as well, because she
Hmm.
has been known to get more than one of those throughout the books.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting weapon because it's the lightsaber is basically plasma contained by magnetic field, and she ended up making this one with like a little switch on it, so that if she switches it one way, it will have a more rigid structure like a normal lightsaber. And if she switches it the other way, the sort of field around it weakens a bit so that she can use it as a whip. It will be more supple, but that also makes it more difficult to use, easier to hurt herself. Um, so the reason that she was able to wield this is because she's just so good at being a Jedi.
Yeah,
And also, yeah, so she also has these hyperspace tripping powers, according to her former master Geos. Um, he said that she could navigate ships using only the Force while in hyperspace. So she didn't need, yeah, the usual tools. And
right.
that she would get these visions indeed in hyperspace. And Geos, he wanted her to explore these abilities, but she kind of turned it down, and she actually stopped using them for a while altogether during the books. So I'm wondering where she stands on that now.
Yeah, hopefully they'll delve into that at least, for a scene or two in the TV show. I wish we got more than 8 episodes per season with Star Wars stuff sometimes,
Yeah.
because there's just
Yeah.
only so much you can fit into 8. Although I feel like the first one might be 60 minutes. I wish they were all 60.
But I mean, I think they might be around an hour each. But I mean, if she has been working on those skills, that could make her even more formidable.
Hmm.
But she also has like these kind of force spidey senses, so she can kind of sense if something's wrong through the force, so that she might not trust that instinct.
Hmm.
Um, And yeah, so Leslie Headland said that Vernestra Rowe was the only character from the High Republic books that would appear in the first season, but there were other High Republic characters she hoped to include in a potential second season, so more reason to read the books. But she felt like Rowe, it was important to bring her in because she's such a long-lived character, she is able to show how the Jedi Order has changed. She's able to reflect that. She's able to be the memory of what's happened before. And you can see, for the people who do read the book, you see the difference between her role as a leader in this show versus, the young upstart prodigy in the books.
Yeah.
Although she is a very focused and determined character. She's not like a wild one.
Right.
So another character that people are excited about is Kel Naka. We get a Wookiee Jedi.
I have been a fan of Wookiee Jedi since reading about Chewbacca's nephew in the old EU timeline. So this is probably going to bring out the 14-year-old in me when he shows up on screen. I think that is an amazing addition to the show.
Yeah, he's played by Finnish actor Jonas Suotamo, who previously portrayed Chewbacca, the most famous Wookiee, in the sequel trilogy and the film Solo. So it's very cool. He's a Wookiee specialist now. um, and we learn that Kel Naka has sequestered himself in the jungles of Kofar, which is a new location. So we get a new jungle planet. I wonder if it's anything like Kashyyyk.
Yeah, I would imagine a bit. I mean, maybe of course, he can't really admit that he's attached to things, but I wonder if he misses home. So,
Mm. Yeah, so Kashyyyk is the main Wookiee planet, which is also very jungly. So I'm curious how
yeah.
similar they'll be. And we also are told that he's living a solitary life. So he sequestered himself living a solitary life. Makes me wonder if he's taken the Barash vow. So
Yeah.
we talked about the Barash vow in previous episodes, and basically it's like a vow of solitude, and you won't take a Padawan, and I don't know, you're just gonna sit in timeout and think about things. I think it probably is related to what we talked about from Legends in the Old Republic about when, someone would fall out of alignment with the Force, they would go sit on the opposite moon and think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he also has a green lightsaber. And if for a new lightsaber color, well, not new, but we have Yord Fandar, played by Charlie Barnett, who's also in Russian Doll, and also like Tales of the City and You. And so Yord is a temple guardian, so he wields a yellow lightsaber, although we're seeing that color more often these days outside that. And he's a by-the-book rule follower, very lawful good for the D&D players, and an overachiever. So I feel like this character is going to frustrate me. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he might frustrate me too, just a little bit.
So the colors of lightsabers in Legends, it's like there's a lot of canon. There's a lot of lore about lightsabers in Legends, and not much of it's been brought into canon yet. So we know, for example, basically the truth of the matter is that green and blue were the first lightsabers because they popped against the backdrops in the original movies.
Right.
Um, Although now it's said, and I'm not sure how much we should take this to heart, as because there's a lot of like random lore that's kind of throwaways from reference books that might be superseded when there's sort of a hierarchy of canonness. So reference books are kind of at the bottom, then the comics and books, and then the TV shows, and then the movies.
Right.
But we're told at this point, green is most commonly chosen by the consulars, the people who focus on the mental knowledge of the Force. Blue is often seen in the hands of guardians who focus on learning combat and warrior arts. And sentinels who seek a balance between the consulars and the guardians are the ones most often wielding yellow. And this includes famously the Jedi Temple Guards.
Mm.
And also, yeah, some yellow lightsabers turn up later in the timeline too. But well, we'll talk about those when we get there. um, but yeah, and so there's the red lightsaber. How is a red lightsaber made, Bob?
You basically have to torture one of those poor crystals, where be it from Ilum or wherever. You have to
Uh-huh.
bleed it.
Yes, bleeding it. And it's part of this whole Sith thing of like bending the Force to your will. Although I guess you could technically, there are dark side users who are not technically Sith who use red lightsabers. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess dark side users bleed it in general. And we've seen rare, like dark orange lightsabers, which seem to be dark Jedi, which is a concept that may or may not be being brought over. We talked about that in a previous episode. We've seen white lightsabers in canon, which tend to be purified red. So kyber crystal, the crystal that makes the saber work, they might be bled by a dark side user and become red, and then taken back by a light side user and purified and become white again. Um, we've also seen some purple. So Venestra's lightsaber is purple, for instance, although it's most famously a character named Mace Windu, played by Samuel L. Jackson, and it's simply because Samuel L. Jackson's favorite color is purple. But I don't know if you've heard this, but there's something in Legends, not into canon yet, but that if you are a purple lightsaber user, it's because you are able to balance the light and the dark side as you use it. And that's why it creates that purple blend of blue and red.
Yeah, I really hope they do get into that a bit. If not in this show, then possibly a second season. That would be cool.
Yeah, I love lightsaber lore, but that would be very interesting. So Venestra's lightsaber is a lighter purple, but it would be interesting if she's still like pulling some small amount from the dark side secretly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they were admonishing her just a little bit with the wielding of that light whip there, and more than one occasion in the books. I know there were a few Jedi that didn't really agree with that, but we'll see how that goes in the show.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they've accepted it about her by now, but
Yeah,
she's a very studious one, but then kind of going her own way, as we see with the Wayseeker plotline too.
mhm.
But yeah, in general for lightsabers, it looks like we're gonna have the biggest variety of colors we've seen outside the games, which makes sense for the High Republic, I guess. But I hope we're getting some good lore to go with it.
Yeah, me too.
We also were confirmed another type of species is being pulled over from legend, the Zigarians, which are a humanoid feline species. So cat people. Like,
Yeah.
bring on the cat people. But they are so we know we're going to get a Zigarian Jedi, but the species in general are known as slavers, so maybe not the nicest ones.
Right.
But then, yeah, so we're shifting over into maybe some of the darker elements of the series. And there's a character called Mother Anastasia, played by Jodie Turner-Smith, who people might know from Queen and Slim. Or I know her from the movie After Yang, and she also played Anne Boleyn in the TV show Anne Boleyn. And she is the leader of a sort of witch clan.
Oh, is she now? I can't wait to see her. This is wild. This is you telling me about her. Haven't heard about her before
Oh,
this
you
podcast
didn't?
recording.
Well,
No.
you know, there's witches in the trailer, right?
Yeah, I think. I wonder if they forgot to describe those with the AD track. I'm gonna have to go back and watch that after this.
Yeah, because she's featured quite prominently, but there's other points where the witches are like doing hand signals together and they appear to affect things. Um,
Wow.
yeah, we don't know. They don't look like Night Sisters. They don't seem to work like Night Sisters, which are a witch clan we're gonna do the most talking about.
Yeah.
But in Legends, the witches are all from the planet of Dathomir, and so maybe these are as well. I did see a Zabrak, which is like the Darth Maul is a Zabrak with like the horns all over the heads.
Hmm.
Did see one of those amongst their numbers, which are a group that also lives in Dathomir. So they could be Dathomiri, but so far the different witch clans we've met in canon are the Night Sisters, the Mountain Clan, which are light side users, which look completely different than this group. Um, in Legends, they named a bunch more, but most of them aren't very well fleshed out.
Right.
We just know that it's often other clans are allying with the Jedi against the Night Sisters.
Yeah.
So these could also be Night Sister, you know, antagonists. The interesting visual thing about her, though, is that she has a swirl pattern on her forehead. So it's in a striking white paint she has dark skin, but it looks like, I mean, it's very visually like striking and appealing, but it looks like it might have something to do with her rank and order. I'm guessing. That's my guess.
Oh,
I don't know.
wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll buy that for sure.
She says in the trailer, destiny is not decided for you by an anonymous source. If you want to pull the thread and change everything, then pull it. And this seems to be a temptation that she's offering May.
Ooh.
Yeah, so we see the witch clan doing some, maybe casting a spell. They have some coordinated hand movements. We see there's a young Jedi Padawan character in Indara's Carrie-Anne Moss's Padawan named Torben, played by Dean Charles Chapman. And at one point, it seems like the clan does something that makes him possessed and his eyes turn black.
Ah, okay. We've seen something like that before,
Hmm.
which I
Yeah, I
won't
mean, I'm
get
wondering
into
how.
right now, but
Yeah, I'm wondering how much we might actually see similarities between what we've seen from other witch clans.
hmm.
Um, I'm also wondering, in legends, there were witches of Dathomir were known to ride a type of animal, a sort of gray, ugly, elephantine type animal without the snout, called Rancor. So I have a soft spot for Rancor. They're like ugly little beasts, but they can be quite nice if they're, your babies.
Yes, they can.
They're massive and scary, so it's an intimidating animal to ride. So I kind of
That's
would love to see that.
yeah. Ever since I read Courtship of Princess Leia back in the day, and we've gotten the Night Sisters and other witches
Hmm.
in both animation and live action. Always wanted to see is some witch or another riding a Rancor.
Yeah. Yeah, Courtship of Princess Leia is a Legends novel that introduced the witches of Dathomir. And then we also get the other intriguing thing everyone's talking about is we see someone with a red lightsaber. Is it a Sith? We don't know. And that person is wearing a dark helmet adorned with a dark smile.
Oh,
So,
wow.
and Saul asks, "What are you to this being?" Not another Marek, right?
I have
Marek is
no clue.
Marek is a character who this is not a spoiler. It's a side back a character who appeared in the back of the Ahsoka TV series, and people spent so much time trying to guess what or who Marek was, and then we just ended up sticking our foots in our mouths. But I don't think this is that.
Yeah, yeah, I doubt it.
um. So yeah, in terms of who or else might show up, who or what else might show up, we've talked about the Nameless, with or without the Nihil, the Drengir, Yoda and Yaddle.
Hmm.
That yeah, I think we might at least get some scene with the council, with the Jedi Council, and see those two and or some other long-lived members of the Jedi Council that we know in later eras.
Yeah, I mean they'd fit perfectly in some point, during the first season. So I would not be surprised at all if we got that.
Yeah, at least it would be kind of weird if they didn't show up in a way, if we're talking
Hmm.
about the Jedi. Um, it would be fun if we saw Maz Kanata, the Pirate Queen.
Yeah,
We talked
I'd love to see her.
we talked about her in the High Republic episode. She's going strong at this point. Um, I doubt we'll see the Sith planet of Korriban we talked about before, but that would be cool. I don't know if we see the Jedi planets of Ahch-To or Tython. This is, of course, after the era where the Jedi have been pulled out of the Outer Rim outposts. But it's almost certain we'll get a mention of Starlight Beacon because Vernestra definitely remembers.
Sure.
So, as far as things we haven't yet discussed, did you hear that there's a Caldor who appears in the background of the trailer that people are like, that's Plo Koon?
I feel like people talk so much about images that they see on Twitter, and I guess it's both a blessing and a curse because nobody adds alt text to those. So when you mention
Hmm.
stuff like that, I mean, now is the first time I'm hearing about so much of this. So
Glad to be
it's
of service.
amazing. Yeah, you really are.
Um, but so okay, so the Keldor in general, they're a species of tall humanoid people who they have three-fingered hands with a thumb, and they have this like thick leathery skin that they kind of like their heads almost look like crabs meets brains. Like they're not an attractive species. um, and they can't breathe the atmosphere that's in most of the galaxy, so they have these masks that are almost like grown into their faces. You never see them without masks and goggles to protect themselves. And there's a particularly famous long-lived Jedi called Plo Koon, and apparently the Keldor in general don't live really longer than humans, but force sensitive Keldor can live up to 250. And again, these are from questionable semi-canonical sources, so this isn't confirmed. But in the Legends timeline, Plo Koon would have been 272 years old at this point in the timeline. And he's of course very attuned to the Force, so he lives, at least that long. So it could be him. We also have to all brace ourselves that it could just be another Keldor because there should be more than one in the galaxy.
Right.
Um, Another person who could show up is Hu Yang. Person, I say loosely.
Hmm.
So, do you want to explain who Hu Yang is?
He, to me, he feels rather like the Ollivander of Star Wars. He helps um, younglings with the making of their lightsabers. He's a font of more than one kind of Jedi knowledge. He's a droid, but to me, he feels like so much more than a droid. He feels like a Jedi. Whenever I
Mm,
hear him on animation or in live action, I so often forget that he's a droid.
yeah. Yeah, he's played by David Tennant, who's, a favorite actor of many people. He's a Mark IV droid, but he's already 25,000 years old at this point in the timeline. But he should be found wherever younglings are getting sabers. He would tell the younglings stories and teach the history of the galaxy, apparently in three parts, and I would love to get to listen in on those. I doubt they're going to do that in this series, but please just release the audio tapes.
Yeah. Oh, that would go over really well if they actually could get David Tennant to narrate that and get a full cast going. Got such an amazing voice as it is, so letting him be a storyteller in terms of Star Wars audio productions would be out of this world.
Yeah. It would be fun though if he made a cameo in this, but I don't know. This doesn't seem like a show where they're going to go cameo heavy. But hey, this is
Right.
someone who's around and is around the Jedi, so you know. Maybe a little less likely is Dex Jetster, who's a basilisk, which is another type of four arms humanoid species, four arms, two legs, but these have like frog-like heads.
Yep.
And some might know him as a diner owner from the prequel trilogy, but before that, in this High Republic era, he was a renowned hyperspace prospector working closely with Maz Kanata and sort of acting like as a herald of sorts for her, spreading her deeds far and wide. So I don't know. It would be fun. He could show up in the background without causing too much distraction, but that's a longer stretch.
Yeah,
Um,
I'd love to see him show up.
And also from the Jedi games, there's a character, Dagon Gera, that some people are saying could show up. He's what's called an Arcanian offshoot. So the Arcanians were this sort of very fair-colored humanoid species, but they would make these offshoots who are genetically engineered, and they would treat them as lesser beings. But the fact that they're genetically engineered might have some interest for certain characters that start to take more prominence at this point in the timeline. Um, I would love to see Arcanians. They do show up throughout the High Republic books, and they have infrared vision, which is interesting. But I think Dagan Gera at this point, he was a Jedi. He refused to leave the planet of Tanalorr when the Jedi were pulled out of the Outer Rim and fell to the dark side. And eventually he was captured and stored in a Bacta tank. So I think he's still in that Bacta tank at this point.
That would make sense. Okay.
So how would you describe a bacta tank?
Um, well, I mean, Bacta is pretty much the cure to so many ailments in the Star Wars galaxy. So, if you've had grievous wounds, you get dunked in there for a little bit, and you're fine. So, um, it's actually fought over quite a bit in some of the older books. It reminds me of a substance in a video game. Like if you attacked quite a bit, you just wipe some of that over your wounds. Or if it's a back to tank, you kind of go in there for a bit of a dunk, and then you're good after a little bit. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, so it's people hang out in a bacta tank to heal themselves, but it's also can be used to keep a character in stasis for even up
right.
to centuries.
Hmm.
So this is something that pops up again and again. But yeah, it's basically you just see them suspended in like, I don't know, sort of goo, and that keeps them in good shape and keeps them from dying.
I don't know why I always imagine it like warm bathtub water. I guess I'll be a
Hmm.
goopy.
I guess I just imagine it as goopy because they're suspended in it.
Yeah, there you go.
Are there any other light side users or non-force users that you're hoping for that you think might show up?
It's probably not going to happen at all. But I mean, Chewbacca's alive around this point. He's probably a really, really, really little
Mm.
guy, really little Wookiee by this point. But he'd be on Kashyyyk, so we might not see him. But I've always wanted to see a very, very young toddler Chewbacca. So who knows?
Well, yeah,
I
maybe if we have Kanaka, maybe he wants to go visit home and visit his nephew
True.
Chewbacca.
There you go.
I'm not saying it's his uncle. I'm just guessing. Anyway, go
There you go.
ahead.
Yeah. Um, Well, I don't know if you'd categorize these guys as light side, but I do hope we get to see a bit more of the underworld in terms of Star Wars at this point in time.
Yeah.
The Hutts play a pretty big role in the High Republic, but I haven't really gotten to see as much of them as I'd like. So I would like to see one or more of them pop up. There was a character featured in the EU books named Beldorian, and he was actually a Jedi Hutt. I don't know. I'd say virtually impossible, but I
Yeah,
mean
that
he
would be
was
cool
force
though.
sensitive, and
Yeah.
he'd be a fun character. But that's not going to happen. I just like the idea of a force sensitive Hutt wielding a lightsaber.
Yes, I need to see this. Yeah, no, that would be cool. I do hope Hutts show up. They are an interesting species. They're like annoying, but amusingly annoying.
Right.
All right. Well, there are some other scoundrels and Sith, of course, that we need to talk about, but let's pick that right back up after a quick break. Be right back. Picking up at the baddies, it's not Star Wars without some scoundrels. So we already said we hope for the Hutts. Um, it would be also interesting to have. There's a bounty hunter who shows up in later comics called Dirge, and he's a Gendai or Gendai. Not sure
Mhm.
how I should pronounce that. And the Gendai, they had a peaceful homeworld, but it was ravaged maybe a couple hundred years before the Acolyte is set. So, but they live for millennia. So there are still survivors alive who remember that happening, including this bounty hunter Dirge. So I don't know, could be a random person who could show up at this point.
Yeah, I've mentioned him many times as for a character that I like to see show up in this because he feels like he's got a great creepy horror vibe going on, and I think he would
Yeah.
be a very imposing character to go up against Jedi.
I also wonder with a character like Vernestra Rowe, will there be an idea? And this is also, I was just watching and talking about Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind on the Lorehounds. And so I wonder, could this be a story that plays on memory, with these long-lived characters who remember things happening, and how does that change things versus someone who's new and fresh and hasn't experienced the same things?
Right.
But yeah, I assume, we're going to get some scoundrels of some sort. We need bounty hunters or pirates or Nihil or something.
True, yeah.
But we're almost certainly going to see the Sith, which, as far as the Jedi know at this point, again, they think that the Sith died out in the Old Republic. But as we talked about in the Old Republic episode, a certain character named Darth Bane, he actually finished off the other Sith and established something he calls the Rule of Two. So, can you summarize the Rule of Two again, Bob?
Oh, the rule of two means that there can only be two Sith at one time. One to embody the power, one to crave it. You've got your master and your apprentice. So that way there's as little backbiting as possible. Although, I mean, it ultimately comes down to that in the end.
Yeah. So they still quietly exist during this time, and throughout the High Republic, they are still there somewhere in the background, operating in the shadows. A master and at least one apprentice. Often they'll take on more than one and like pit them against each other to see who's the strongest. Things like
Right.
that. But it is interesting to note, first of all, that Leslie Headland said that she's a fan of the game Knights of the Old Republic 2, the Sith Lords. And she said that Darth Treya, who's the character we talked about in the episode where we talked about that, the character Kreia, her Sith name, because when you become a Sith, you get a new name. Her Sith name is Darth Treya. So it's interesting. She specifically cited her as an inspiration for this show. And she also said there would be an Alien versus Predator inspired episode, which I'm very curious about.
Oh, yeah. That sounds like that's going to be an interesting episode. It's the first time
Yeah.
I've heard of it. I can't wait to see that one.
So we know there should be at least two Sith alive during this time, but we don't necessarily know who they are, but we have some guesses based on the lore we know. Of course, like I said, there's the Sith have their secret Sith names, but they would be known publicly by another name. So technically, any character we meet could be one of the Sith. But if we trace back the line of Sith that we know of, there is a famous one who would have been a teenager around this time, and that's Darth Plagueis. Now, you were excited to talk about Darth Plagueis, Bob.
Yeah. I'm not really sure what species they're going to make him in canon. I know
Right.
that, he was a very influential Mune in
Mhm.
Legends. So hopefully he'll kind of be the same. I can't wait to hear what he sounds like if he does show up in this as a much younger character. Um,
Yeah.
and of course, if he's a teenager at this point, we might see his master, Tenebris.
Hmm. Well, so yeah, before we get to Tenebris,
Mhm.
just focusing on Plagueis, he is he is indeed in Legends a moon or mun with orange eyes. So this is like a tall, thin humanoid species who's known for running the banking clan. Um, but this is a very distinctive looking species. So if we see one of those turn up on screen, people would be like pointing, like, "Oh, look!" Uh, but we don't know. That's in Legends, so we don't
Mhm.
have solid confirmation in canon. Like, what if he is human in canon? We don't really know.
Yeah. I mean, if he introduces himself as Higo Damask, though, I'm gonna probably cheer because that's his public name, of course.
Yeah, yeah, they've changed names for other characters, so we're not really sure. I did wonder
Yeah.
if that young Padawan who goes black-eyed, Torben, if he could become it, but he's human, he's not moon. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but he would be a teen at this point in time, which is not too young to become a Jedi trainee.
There you go.
But yeah, as you mentioned, we know about Darth Plagueis. We know a bit more about him because, mild spoiler, he grows to great power, does some key research, and we hear stories about him later in the timeline. So it would be cool to see him on screen, but again, he's quite young. Timeline wise, it's maybe even more prime for us to see his master Darth Tenebris. So how would you describe Darth Tenebris?
Well, he in the old timeline anyway, he's a Bith Sith, so he's
Yeah,
I think he's got a rather large
fifth,
head.
fifth.
Yeah. So
It's fun to
who
say.
knows though? I mean, they might change his species up too. I really hope they keep the species the same. But I mean,
Yeah,
it would be a really interesting way to throw us off of, who's going to be Tenebris and who's going to be Plagueis. I've just
yeah,
got those species just stuck in my head since we were introduced to those way back in 2011, 2012, in terms of them appearing in their book the first time. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, it again, yeah. He's a Bith, which are like they're sort of insectoid-looking species, humanoid, but they have like these many folds in their cheek. So they're very distinctive looking. So that's again one. If a Bith shows up on screen, everyone's gonna be like, "It's Tenebris." Um, but it could also be a reveal, like we meet someone else, and it's like, "Oh, here's my master."
there you go.
And of course, as I mentioned, that we know what pairing this age ends with, but the Sith sometimes take on more than one acolyte and pit them against each other.
Yeah, I wish I could remember where this analogy was made, but I feel like at one point in some book or other, they mention, throwing a crumb to those that follow you, and whoever made it out on top, was the one that you needed to take special interest in. So, the Sith are always trying to get their underlings to squabble just to see who wants to
Right.
obtain the power enough, just to see how ruthless that individual can be. And whoever comes out on top, then they're like, okay, well, you did good. So come on.
Yeah. Part of me also wondered, what if the acolyte does not refer to a Sith acolyte? What if it's a witch's acolyte?
That would be interesting as well.
Because we see the mother character, Anastasia, we're talking to Amandla Stenberg, and maybe this character, the Amandla Stenberg character, is the acolyte.
Yeah.
Do you have any other dark side users or anyone else that you want to mention that you hope might or think could show up?
Oh man, I'm drawing a blank at the moment. I'm sure I'll
Mhm.
think of them later.
No. Well, I mean, yeah, we can't do an exhaustive list, of course, but if any
Sure.
other Easter eggs pop up in the show, I'll definitely point them out. Um, this brings us to the three big potential spoilers. So I'm giving anyone who doesn't, again, this is not based on anything that we know. We haven't read spoilers. This is purely based on the marketing and speculation and, yeah, things that were shown to us in the trailer. So, but if anyone wants to get out before they hear that, then that's great. We'll see you back in this feed next weekend for the breakdown of the first two episodes of The Acolyte. For those of you who want to stick around, it's spoiler time. Spoiler time. Not really. They're not really spoilers. But a lot of people do think that Indara might be the Carrie Ann Moss character, might be the Jedi who's killed, and that maybe she'll be killed in the first episode. So this is again purely based on speculation, but kind of makes sense. No?
Yeah, I think it makes perfect sense if it does turn out to be her.
Yeah, I mean, as otherwise it's going to be a nameless Jedi that they are not showing to us in the marketing.
Yeah, I would think they'd want you to care about her just a bit, so you're actually going to feel something when she's taken out. Or, I mean, that's what I would think anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder if even if she's killed in the first episode, she might appear in flashbacks.
Hmm.
And so the second potential spoiler is something that you were already picking up on when we were talking about the totally normal guy, Kemir, who said, the Jedi justify their galactic dominance in the name of peace, but that peace is a lie.
Yep,
And
that is definitely part of that good old Sith code.
yes. Yeah. So the Sith lived by a code like the Jedi, but the Sith is kind of like the opposite of the Jedi code, where the Sith code is like all about how the strong must destroy the weak to purify, blah, blah,
Hmm.
blah. And so the Sith code goes, peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The Force shall free me. Peace is a lie. So, yeah, do you think they're trying to throw us off the scent with him saying that? Or is that just like a wink, wink for those who know?
They very well might be trying to throw us off the scent, or he could be influenced by one of those artifacts that he has.
Mm,
Um, I know that those dark side artifacts, both in Legends and Canon, they actually can have an influence on those who might not practice the Force. So
mm.
he might need to get rid of one or two of those.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe he's not a Sith, but he is like reading their readings and is like, this makes sense.
Hmm.
Hmm. And so, okay, this brings us to the last and biggest spoiler. Not spoiler, but kind of confirmed. um, so a lot of people have noticed that Amandla Sternberg is pictured twice on the poster. She's seen with two different hairstyles in the trailers, and there's double rings in the O of Acolyte. So what do you think that might mean?
Double rings.
She's pictured twice on the poster, seen with two different hairstyles in the trailers. And there's double
Yeah.
rings.
Yeah.
There's a lot of thinking that she is potentially playing twins or clones or
Yeah.
different characters who look the same.
Yeah, that would be fascinating.
And if she is playing another character, the actress herself may have accidentally spilled that character's name as Osha.
I did
So
not know that. Wow.
So this is something that's probably going to be revealed in the first episode, but it is now it's all over the interviews. It's people talking about this theory that seems like more than a theory that Amandla Sternberg, the actress, is doing double duty.
Oh, wow. That's going to prove to be an interesting 8 episodes if that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I can see why people would say, yeah, she's doing the heavy lifting in this series and apparently knocking it out of the park. So, Bob, what are your hopes for the show?
Uh, I hope to get a better understanding of the darker side of the Force in terms of canon. I mean, we haven't seen very much in terms of how our shadowy figures are operating. We usually see things from the perspective of folks on the light side. And
Mhm.
what really interested me when the Acolyte was announced that we were going to be seeing it, the galaxy from, hopefully a much darker perspective. So I hope to see quite a bit of that in these 8 episodes. I love lightsaber duels to death, especially now that they are described with audio description. So, I
Mhm.
mean, give me more than one of those, please.
Mhm.
That's really going to keep me on the edge of my seat. And I really love the whodunit aspect, the whodunit vibe that they're going for with this, because I think it adds to the mystery of these episodes. And I think that an episode that leaves you wanting more, coming back, the following week, um, I'm really up for a lot of that as well. So, and they've already whetted my appetite for so much of this and more. And I can't wait to get
Yeah.
into this when it starts.
Yeah, I'm very excited for all the characters. I'm excited for this new age, but I'm most excited for the way that Leslie Headland is describing the writing with the layers and the different perspectives. And this is exactly my favorite kind of writing. And to see, I mean, we got that with Andor, a show we're going to watch later in the timeline. We got that level of writing, and if we can get that here with also this looks a bit more like the more kitschy Star Wars in a way. Not that it's going to be kitschy, but the fact that it includes more lightsabers, more aliens, more Star Wars-ness.
Right.
So I'm cannot describe how excited I am for this.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah. So yeah, the next episode is going to be John and I are going to be do weekly scene by scene breakdowns. We're figuring out a recording schedule, but I think we're going to be able to get it out early in the weekend after the episode airs. So the episode's going to release, I think, on Tuesday nights in the U.S. and time zone, and then on Wednesday for the rest of us. But yeah, we're going to turn these around as quickly as possible, and we're going to then also be Bob and I revisiting this part of the timeline in the coming year with coverage of the High Republic books, which we're going to cover phase by phase. So you might have already listened to those before this one. But in the meantime, Bob, I hope you'll come back with me to do some mailbag episodes for each era. We've gotten some good mail in so far.
I cannot wait to participate in those. Those are, I'm sure, going to be a lot of fun.
And if anyone else wants to submit for the mailbag episodes, whether they're up or not, because we'll always do more, please send your thoughts and feedback and hopes and dreams for Star Wars to swtimelinepodcast@gmail.com. Now, after the Acolyte release, after that's done, we're going to switch to bi-weekly episodes. And first, we're going to backtrack a little bit, do a foray into Visions with Martin and Chelsea with 5 episodes of Sith Legends of the Old Republic from the animated series Visions. And those episode numbers are in the show notes for anyone who already wants to prepare. But Bob and I will then be wrapping up the lore for the tail end of the High Republic so that we can move into the 4th era, the time of the prequel movies. And there'll be more info on what and how we're going to cover all that 4th era content in the weeks to come. But yeah, thank you to Jedi Bob for partnering with me for this pre-Acolyte lore blitz. Please do check out his YouTube channel, which you'll find linked in the show notes. What are you up to there this week?
Actually doing a couple of action figure reviews. I'm doing more gameplay videos. On Saturday, I plan on releasing part 2 of the Dark Phoenix episode reviews for the X-Men animated series. So quite a lot of stuff this week.
You've been quite busy.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can find us both on Twitter. You'll find those links in the show notes as well. This episode is produced by me, published by the Lorehounds, and you can really help us out, especially as this is a new feed, by sharing this episode and this podcast with anyone you think might be interested. 5-star reviews, especially if there's some nice words attached, are really helpful in just encouraging us to do this thing, but also in helping other people find and figure out that they might like this podcast as well. Please do also check out the affiliates on the network. You'll find the Lorehounds link in the show notes with links to all the other podcasts where you can subscribe in your platform of choice. We've got my own podcast, Will Shift Dust, which is currently about to release the Beacon 23 season 2 finale. And then I think it sounds like we're going to get to do some interviews with the showrunners of Beacon 23. So fingers crossed that works out. Also on the network, we've got Radioactive Ramblings doing Fallout lore, and they're going to be doing weekly coverage of The Boys when that comes back in a couple weeks. And Rings and Rituals, you get the double Tolkien scholar goodness for the deepest dives into the world of Lord of the Rings and the Rings of Power. And Properly Howard is finishing its Felonies and Fugazi season with Rocky. Also, on the main Lorehounds feed, you'll find John and I, John, who will be doing the weekly Acolyte recaps. We're also doing weekly Doctor Who recaps. We've got a new Sonic Screwcast feed where you can find that, but it's also in the main Lorehounds feed. And there's going to be a Kingdom and the Planet of the Apes episode, an upcoming Furiosa episode with David Aaron from Radioactive Ramblings and I. And the guys are doing House of the Dragon recaps and weekly coverage of that show with a show guide. You can do a season pass, get it all. Yeah, you'll find all those links in the show notes. What are you most excited about other than the Acolytes coming this summer, Bob?
I can't wait to see The Boys. That's probably going to be really good. There's so much that they're just throwing at us this summer. So
yeah, we're calling it Hot Lore Summer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for those of you listening live, enjoy getting into your Hot Lore Summer, and we'll see you back here to discuss the first 2 episodes of The Acolyte after the 5th. Wear your Jedi detective caps, and I hope you packed your light whip. Bye.
Bye.